My greatest hope for the future of humanity is that we learn to see each other exactly where we are instead of projecting on everybody where we want to be and looking at everyone as a reason why we're not there. Instead, I'd so much rather for us to all recognize that the universe is not limited, it's abundant. There's enough for everybody. There's plenty to go around. Nobody has to compete. This is not a competition I want you to win too. And if we could just see each other as exactly who we are for the beautifully broken, wonderfully put back together creatures that are constantly expanding, I think it would bring a lot of peace to the world. Because if you can see someone in their pain, you can see them in their joy, and if you can feel empathy for them and their pain, you can help them overcome that. And I think if we could do that more often, it would have really long lasting effects for everyone.
Hey there, beautiful souls. It's your girl, Allie, and we are back at it again for another episode of Living Life Consciously. Today, we have a very special guest lined up for you, and I am stoked to get started. So without further ado, Justin, say hey.
Hey there, Cosmic Thrill Seekers. I'm Justin. This is Living Life Consciously, where we explore the extraordinary, ride the waves of inspiration, and embark on an adventure of limitless curiosity together.
Hi, I'm Leslie, also known as Light Being Love, an eternal spiritual being having a temporary human experience, and I'm grateful to be here.
Hi, my name is Erin, and I am an intuitive and an energy alchemist and an energy channel, and I am beyond thrilled to be here with you guys today.
So we are beyond excited to introduce Erin Brown, a masterful clairsentient energy channel and intuitive healer with over 25 years of experience in both patient care and education. Erin Brown isn't just an expert in energy work, she's a beacon of light in the realms of oracle card readings, shadow work, and energetic system cleansing. With advanced degrees in both education and healthcare, Erin offers a holistic approach to healing, combining her vast knowledge and intuitive gifts to help you release blockages and tap into universal healing energy. With her popular series, Professor Brown Breaks It Down, airing every Monday on YouTube, Erin bridges the gap between metaphysical and physical medicine, making complex concepts accessible and engaging. At the Conscious Chrysalis Wellness Center, you'll find a safe and welcoming space to explore your transformational journey without fear or judgment. Discover how to unlock your true potential and live life consciously with Erin Brown.
Yay! Yay!
Thank you so much for being here today. Is there
Yes,
anywhere
thank you.
specific that you would like to start?
No, I'm happy to talk about anything. You know, I've had a storied journey in a short amount of time, so I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about anything that you might be curious about.
Okay, so Erin, can you share the moment you realized you had clairsentient abilities and how did it shape your journey through doing energy work?
So I started with energy work. When I went through my awakening experience at the time, I had been a nurse for 25 years, and then I was teaching at a medical school. I was teaching new doctors, MDs, PhDs, designing simulations, very high tech, very medically science based. And in 2019, I was diagnosed with a disease called APS, antiphospholipid syndrome. And what that is when the protein layer on your red blood cells gets stripped away and it causes you to clot. The way they found this, I had a bunch of blood clots in my body all at once. I was told I had this disease, to make a long story short. And for a while, I was just going along being treated with this. And this takes very caustic medication. You have to inject yourself twice a day with blood thinners. It really, it's not fun. Yeah, it's not fun. And then COVID hit. Now, working for a medical school, it's really hard to teach someone how to suture during COVID because I couldn't stand in front of them. So all of us got sent home from the university in one day. As someone who is constantly busy and I have a busy mind and I always need something to do, I was sitting there one day and I was thinking, you know what? I have access to the best library, one of the best libraries in the world. Why am I not researching this disease? So during my time off from work, I got into the school library and I started researching this. And what I noticed was that there were certain criteria for this disease that I didn't meet. I had all my medical records. As a nurse, I'm very diligent about my records. I always have copies. I'm always reviewing and stuff like that, just because it's been beat into my head that I have to do that. So I was going back through my tests, and I noticed that there's a specific test that needs to be done that I had not had done. So I made an appointment. I go to the specialist, and I was that person. I brought all my stuff in, and I said, "Look what this says," and all this. And the doctor that I was working with, no kidding aside, looked me in my face and said, "I'm the expert. You listen to me. You do what I tell you to do, or you're going to get very sick if you don't."
Ew.
So,
I don't
right,
like that. That's like
Yeah.
not
right,
good bedside manner, in my opinion.
right. Well, in addition to the way he acted, as someone who teaches new medical students, new doctors, I thought to myself, no, 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 we're not doing this. I tell all of my students, your patients work for you. You have to incorporate them and all that sort of stuff. So when I left the office, I was really upset about it, but I didn't want to keep taking the medication because I had noticed I was feeling worse and worse and worse the more I took this medication.
Sure.
So I go back through the research, and I found out that the doctor who discovered this disease, Dr. Hughes, was actually still alive and still teaching in London at this college. I mean, he was probably, I think he was in his mid 80s, but he was like an emeritus there. So I thought, I'm going to email him, just see what happens. So I emailed Dr. Hughes, and I said, I understand you discovered this disease. You know it better than anybody. Here are my test results. I'm not asking you to tell me professionally, do I have this or not? All I'm asking is if you think I should get a second opinion. Because my thought was, if he doesn't answer, who cares? It's not no skin off my back. But he did. He answered me, and he told me, he said, "No, you need to get a second opinion." So after that happened, right, I went and had the test repeated. I did not have this disease. And at that point,
Wow.
when I found out I didn't have it, I had allowed myself to sort of wrap up in the victimness of having this disease. It was my whole identity. I can't do this because I have that. I feel this way because I have it. I blamed everything on this, and suddenly it was gone. Suddenly gone. So my whole world just sort of fell in around me, and I spent a good week and a half. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it to you other than it was a complete mental collapse. All of the ideas of who I thought I was and what I knew were completely ripped away from me. And what I started to notice is that weird stuff started happening. I had these weird vibrations running through my body. I would go in the bathroom and flick the light on, and all the bulbs would blow. I would get in my car, and all the electronics in my car would start going off in random order without turning it on. They would just start, the radio would turn on, the lights would turn on, all kinds of stuff was happening. And I could not figure out what was going on. And a woman I happened to work with asked me, she said, "Have you ever heard of Reiki?" And I said, "I've heard of it. It's crap. It's not real." And she's like, "No, no, no. I think you should try it. Nothing else is working. Why don't you try it?" And I was like, "Oh, fine." So I go and had this Reiki session with a woman who was literally just practicing. She hadn't got her certifications or anything. She was just practicing.
Okay.
And the minute she tapped into my energy, it's like an explosion happened. Everything just moved outward in a really fast manner.
Wow.
So through that, I learned, because it made such an impact on me, I decided to learn how to do Reiki myself, because I thought, well, if I can learn how to control my own energy, this will be helpful. Started learning Reiki, got my certifications, opened the wellness center, and started practicing on people. But what started to happen is, as I was doing Reiki on people, I started to get messages. Like, I would have a thought drop in my head out of nowhere, and I'm sitting here going, what is that? Where is that coming from? And for a long time, I dismissed it and dismissed it and dismissed it. I'm making it up. I'm crazy. It's in my head and all this sort of stuff. And then one day I just looked at somebody and I just said, when I was doing your session, this is what came up. Does that make any sense to you? And the look on her face, I mean, her eyes got enormous. Her blood drained from her face. She goes, "Oh my God, how'd you know that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know how I knew that."
Okay.
So I started that way, getting messages during energy sessions. And I had always fought against the idea of using cards, always. For some reason, I had some teaching, knowledge, something in my head that it was hokey or weird or something like that. For a long time, I fought against it, fought against it, fought against it, until one day, a friend of mine who's also an intuitive asked me, "Why don't you use cards? It seems like it would give you some clarity." And I said, "No, I can't. I don't read cards." She goes, "Well, how do you know?" And I go, "Well, I just can't." She said, "Well, have you ever tried?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, So she gave me a deck of cards, and I started messing with them, and it was amazing to me how much more clear the information I was receiving was made by the cards, because I get very generalities, right? Like, I get a lot of imagery, but it's not a complete image. Like, I might get an image of a woman sort of like today in a session, I got an image of this woman sort of wading her way through this bog. Like, it looked like the water was like mid calf, like a swamp, and she's sort of pushing her way through here. So for me, I use my cards, and what comes out in addition to that are the words like dissension, argument, family, this sort of stuff. And I go, okay. So what this is telling me is that you've gotten lost in the weeds on some argument that's going on with your family. You're too zoomed in. You need to back out, get some clarity. There's a miscommunication. So it was a very natural evolvement into the using the cards in addition. But there's plenty of times, like, my husband is the most notorious person this happens with, and I realize it's because I see him all the time, and we've been married for 26 years, so it's probably that. But I'll be sitting next to him, and a word will drop in my head, and a second later it shoots out of his mouth, and it happens all day long. And not quick enough, right? Not quick enough for me to say it, but I think it, and it comes out of his mouth all the time, all the time.
Happens to us
Same.
too.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. And, Bashar says that it's not telepathy, it's telepathy. And what that means is that you're on the same vibrational wavelength as that person. So you tap into what
Resonating.
they're feeling and thinking, and you're able to pull that from them. When I do card readings for people, when I first connect to someone, I have to sit and center myself, and I'm literally seeing my vibrations spread out so that it encompasses them. That way I can get the information from them.
Okay.
That's also how I keep myself from being inundated with information at like the grocery store, because when I first started this, I would walk into the grocery store and I was getting stuff left and right, left and right, left and right. I had to leave the grocery store. I'm like, this is too much, because I don't know what belongs to anybody. It's just an overwhelming rush of feeling that I was too much for me to handle. So that's kind of how it started. It sort of very naturally evolved. And, I tell clients all the time, you don't have to try. You don't have to try for any of this. You just have to have patience and let it unfold naturally for you. And then it won't be such an effort. It'll just be the next logical thing. But if you're trying to force it, if you're trying to skip steps or force it, it's like trying to go from first grade to fifth grade. You don't know how to do math when you get there. You have to go through all the steps. And I think that's something that gets lost a lot in the spiritual journey. People get excited about the idea of the third eye, and they forget about all this other stuff going on. But if you don't have balance anywhere else, there's nowhere for the energy of the third eye to go. It's a circulation system. It has to work together,
Gotcha. I love how the things that you were very resistant to at first became the things that empowered you later on. Once you finally was like, all right, I'll give it a whirl. Let's see,
Oh, absolutely. 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 There's a lot of it. Public speaking, this, never. 10 years ago, if you would have asked me if I could do this, I would have thrown up just at the thought of it. Okay. And then somehow, right. So then somehow I ended up at the university, which was a job that I applied for that I had zero qualifications for. I applied for the job because I thought, well, that sounds fun. So I applied for it. It took me a year to get that job. But when I got that job, it put me in front of small groups of people where I had to learn to project. I had to learn to engage. I had to learn to do this. Then that slowly progressed to me getting on TikTok and engaging with people on TikTok, which slowly progressed to YouTube, which progressed to the classes. It's really, really interesting when you take a moment to look back and you can see how every little step just has kind of led you in that direction. And that's what I mean by it very naturally unfolds if you if you don't force it, you know?
Yeah,
But I have a really
that.
interesting tie for you about talking about retrospect, right? In my undergraduate degree, my undergraduate studies are in psychology. So that's my main background. And when I was in my undergraduate studies, I took a class called Abnormal Psychology. And the final assignment for the year was we had to write a paper about a fringe religion, and we had to write all the logical reasons why it wasn't real. So I picked this woman named Doreen Virtue. Have you ever heard of her?
I have.
Okay, so back in the day, Doreen Virtue, she used to claim to communicate with angels, and she would talk about doing counseling for angels and all this stuff. And at the time, I got her books and I wrote this paper just ripping her apart. I mean, I threw science all over this poor woman, got an A+ on the paper. Fast forward literally 20 years later, I opened my wellness center, and this person that I consider to be a mentor and a teacher and it's very important in my life walks into the wellness center and he says, I have a gift for you. And he hands me a book and it's by Doreen Virtue.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting there looking at the book and I go, wow, full circle moment.
Yeah.
Because now,
Came around nicely.
right,
Mhm.
now I'm going to read this book with a different eye. I'm going to read this with optimism and openness and willingness to accept something I don't understand. Where the first time I read the exact same book, I read it with a different view. And that is a great
Perspective.
demonstration of like how your reality shifts in a short period of time if you can allow it to do so, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
Yes.
Kind of the same thing happened to me. I used to be total nuts and bolts, total, science, everything, right? And when I started studying the UAP phenomena, it led me down this path to spirituality, and it's just
Oh
opened
yeah.
my mind to so many things, that I never would have, looked twice at before.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And looking back on my life, I've always been a nerd. I've always been a science nerd,
Yeah.
but I've always been drawn to stories like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and very magical stuff. That's where I feel most at home, not in the science-based stuff, which if I think about it, maybe that was my first indication that I was focused in the wrong direction. The things that are magical and special in the world are what makes me feel excited and looking forward to it. When I think about science, while I can appreciate science, it feels incomplete. It
Right.
feels like there's another side to the story that we just don't know.
Exactly.
I would like to take this opportunity to ask you about your wellness center. You've mentioned it
Mm.
already through conversation, and I was looking at your website last night, and I think it's really cool that you're offering all these different things. I also happened to see a very familiar face on there. I was looking through the pictures, and I was like, I know that dude from TikTok. How do I recognize him? It was Saint Finnegan from TikTok.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh snap! I wonder how she knows him. That's so funny.
Yes, yeah. So Heather, my business partner Heather, actually knows Finn. She makes malas. The malas that he wears, almost all of them are from her, I believe. So she has a good relationship with him. So we love Finn. The wellness center, yeah, the wellness center has been a labor of love, I will tell you. We opened 2.5 years ago, and at the time we opened, I was still working full time for the university. So we managed to open the wellness center while working full time somewhere else. And when Heather and I opened it, the intention behind it was both of us had very disruptive awakening experiences where it was very difficult. We felt like very alone. We didn't have anyone to talk to. We didn't know where to go. And every crystal store I went to, especially at the beginning, I wanted to go in just because I wanted to talk to somebody. I wanted someone to tell me I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. It's okay.
And validate with your
Yes, that shared experience. I was looking for that shared experience, but every single um, crystal store I went into, it just felt like they were watching me. Like they wanted me to buy something. They weren't interested in having a conversation. It was, get in, get out kind of thing. So when Heather and I designed the wellness center, it's actually designed and looks like a living room in a house. Has a couch with a table. We've got a fireplace and a bookshelf full of books of all different teachers.
Wow.
Because we wanted to foster a sense of being able to come and talk about your experience without feeling judged or worried that someone's going to think you're crazy. We want people to understand that, yeah, we want people to understand they're not alone. And the less alone you feel, the more confidence you have in stepping forward into this. So at the Wellness Center, we do carry a ton of products. We have cards and clothes and crystals and jewelry and all the stuff. But our main thing is our services. We offer energy services. We call it energetic alchemy and not Reiki, because we're not calling on just Reiki. In Reiki, they teach you to call on the energy of Reiki. And because we're calling on multiple aspects of energy, we didn't feel right calling it Reiki.
Okay.
But for me, when I do it, it's kind of like I was telling you, where I will work with the energy to open their energy and I get messages at the same time. Heather is an inner child healing expert. She does inner child regression work, and she also helps to nourish that inner child. So she offers those services. I do card readings, and then my specialty is shadow work. I actually offer a guided shadow work class.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, the shadow work I use is a curriculum. I was looking to see if I have it. Is a curriculum-based shadow work book that starts shallow and works its way deeper with different exercises. There's about 50 or 60 exercises in there that you go through one at a time to help you reflect on things. And I really like the way the curriculum sort of peels away layers one at a time. So you don't start and hit a brick wall. You start slower and sort of work your way down. And the idea behind the shadow work class is that you're not doing it alone, that you have someone to talk to, you have someone to bounce ideas off. Because
Yeah.
I think with shadow work, it's really, really easy to be hard on yourself and to get sucked down that drain of, oh, I'm just a terrible person. I did these terrible things. But it's not about that. It's about recognizing that each thing that you've experienced in your life has helped make you who you are and brought you where you are, and embrace all those pieces. So that's kind of the Wellness Center, the Conscious Chrysalis. We're right outside of Chicago in Schaumburg. So we're about 30 minutes, I'd say, northwest of the city.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So can customers
Awesome.
like take advantage of your services online also, or is it like you have to be there in physical person?
No, so all my readings are available online. If you go to the website, they're just labeled as one-on-one with Erin. It's a 30-minute session where we are face to face. We can do whatever you want in that session. I will do energy work if you want. I will read cards if you want. But what tends to happen is I just start having a conversation with someone, and that's where that clairsentience kicks in.
Yeah.
And as I'm talking to them, it kind of helps guide the conversation. And a lot of times, I'm just helping them talk themselves through things. But I will use my cards for clarity or anything else you want. So it's 30 minutes of direct one-on-one time.
Well,
The 1 hour energy sessions need to be in person for me. I am not practiced enough doing it online to do it that way. I hope to get there, but not yet. And then Heather offers both in person and online for all her
awesome.
services.
Awesome. What's one of the most profound sessions that you've had without giving away any personal information?
So one of the most profound sessions I had was the most effective and most profound. So there was a woman who came to see me, and she said she'd been feeling stuck for about a year and a half. She couldn't figure out why. She said everything's fine. Everything in my life is fine. I don't understand. I'm doing the things. I feel fine. I feel fine. So okay, I get into her energy and I get down into her sacral chakra. And when I get there, there is this profound feeling of grief that just rushes to the surface. But when I see this grief, it's shown to me hidden as if there's something blocking it or over it. And there's also this feeling of I don't deserve to mourn this is kind of the feeling that came with it. And so when I get her out of the session and I'm talking to her about it, I said, "What is this grief that you have?" And for a minute, she just looked at me and she goes, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, it's something that you feel like you're not allowed to be sad about." And as soon as I said that, she sat back in the chair and just waterfalls of tears. She goes, "I had an ectopic pregnancy about a year ago,
Oh.
and I was told it was no big deal. Don't worry about it. You're fine. It's over. It wasn't a real baby. It wasn't this. It wasn't
To
that."
her,
She
it
goes,
was
and
way more meaningful than that.
yes. And she's like, "I stuffed it all down because I told myself it's no big deal. I'm overreacting and all this sort of stuff." And all the grief for not only the loss of the pregnancy, but the grief over the expected outcome that she thought she was going to have,
Sure.
the expectation of how she would feel as a mom, because she knew she was pregnant. It just quickly escalated into this problem. So probably for me, seeing the most direct and most quick result was that one.
Okay.
Um, we did have a woman come in who had a goiter, had a thyroid problem,
Okay.
and she was coming to us for energy work and seeing her doctor on a regular basis. And every time she saw her doctor, he would measure it, it's standard procedure. Over the 6 months that she was with us, the only thing that changed in her routine was us. And in that 6 months, that goiter shrunk significantly to the point where her doctor was asking her, "What are you doing? Because it's going away. It's getting better. I can't explain this," and all this sort of stuff. And she had hard like evidence to show it started at this. I had this many sessions, then it was this, and I had this many sessions, then it was this. So that was probably the most profound physical evidence that I've ever gotten. But I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of stuff change.
Wow.
So what about your health? What happened? I don't know if you finished what you were saying as far as like your own health. And so did you start to heal yourself? Is that what happened?
Yeah,
Or
so kind of. So
okay.
so at the time when I found out that I was misdiagnosed, I was on many medications. I was on an injection for that disease. I was on 2 medications being treated for depression. I was on a medication for anxiety. I was on medication to help me sleep. I was on a medication for my stomach acid. So there was like my breakfast was like a handful of pills every day. So once I had this misdiagnosis, it actually caused me to question everything I was taking. If it was so easy to give me this and not listen to me, and what am I taking just out of habit because they tell me to take it?
Yes.
Luckily, I have a very good primary care doctor. And when I went to him, I said, I want to get off all these meds. I want to see, because at that point, I had been on the depression and anxiety meds for like 30 years. And I didn't know what I even felt like not on these meds. Do I even have this? So I very slowly and responsibly stepped myself down off of these medications and started doing shadow work to kind of bring up this stuff from that space. And I can tell you now, 2 years later, I take 0 medications other than I had thyroid cancer and I don't have a thyroid. So I have to take thyroid replacement. I haven't been sick. I've never had COVID. I haven't even had so much as a cold since I started taking care of myself. I do get allergies. And I do get migraines because the migraines are caused by the stupid weather in Illinois. But everything else, once I started focusing on myself and actually listening to how I felt, it changed everything. I mean, one of the biggest changes I made was I cut meat out of my diet. Not because I love the baby, not because, to be honest, not because I love the baby animal. I mean, I do, I love the baby animals, but that's not why. I just noticed that every time I ate it, I did not feel good. I felt tired and bloated and gross. It's just, ugh. So I just, you know what, let me just try not eating it. And man, everything changed. I gave up alcohol. I don't drink alcohol at all. I gave up a lot. I mean, sugars, all these stuff that very naturally I started to weed out of my diet because I noticed I was feeling better and better the more I got rid of. So now I'm at this point where I eat a vegetarian diet that's high in protein, like soy. I drink like 95% water. I'm out in the sun all the time, and I have never felt better. And even though I'm older now, I get told I look younger now than I did 3 years ago or 2 years ago when I started making these changes.
Wow.
And
You
I think
definitely have a glow. You have a glow. Like every time I see you on video, you're just glowing. And I'm sure your positive attitude is part of that as well. I think the mental, the way we think is really important as far as
it
our
is
health.
paramount. I think it's the number one thing. I did have one of my old colleagues who is a PhD get into I'm not going to call it an argument, a discussion with me about some of these things. And what he kept saying was, what if it's just placebo? What if it's just placebo? And I kept saying to him, who cares if it's just placebo? If it's working, it's working. So by nature, doesn't that discount it from being a placebo? And he said, well, you're just telling them they're going to get better, and they do. And I said, again, I don't see your logic. If they're getting better, they're getting better. Exactly. If I can make you better with energy work versus giving you a pill that you might have to take for the rest of your work, for the rest of your life, I mean, maybe we should try it.
I mean, one of the things about, regular, protocol for medicine is just they're treating the symptoms. They're never getting to the root of the problem. So and then there's the side effects for one medication, so they have to give you another thing for that symptom, and it's just an ongoing thing. And they're not really. I think hopefully it'll change, but they'll be taught more. I mean, I know they go to school for like ever to become have a PhD and do doctor, or even nurses, or any of the people in the medical field go to school for a long time for what they do. But I think it's super important that like nutrition and all, I think hopefully that energy work will be a part of like the normal thing. I want it to blend together, and so I think that's what's going to happen.
Medicine and the Western medicine
I'm gonna think
to,
it.
like, get together and have a hybrid baby or something. Because right now, farm is, I don't want to say poisoning people, but I'll just leave it at that.
It is.
It doesn't have the best intentions. It doesn't have the best of intentions. We can say that. We can say
I'm very big on intentions, and it's like when your intention And I could generally say that in my opinion, Big Pharma's intention is to make money, just like every other corporation, every other business that exists, right? But it's not like it's looking at you as like a number or like a chart or like a file. It's not looking at you as a
Yeah.
whole. Like
Yeah.
it's just focusing in on the symptom rather than like taking in, because like when you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, for example, they ask you, what have you been thinking about lately? What kind of foods do you eat? What hobbies do you have? What do you do that makes you happy and brings you joy? A regular doctor does not ask you that.
No,
They don't
they
care
don't
about
care.
that. You know,
Yes.
it's like a
Right.
non-factor.
I think that's the biggest
Yes.
distinction between the two,
Yeah.
is, one just treats symptoms and another tries to, treat the mentality of the person.
It's a more
You know,
holistic
yeah.
approach, in my opinion.
And
Yes.
happiness
Yes.
and living life without stress and eating, right are the three biggest things.
And doing your shadow work, because
Yes.
undealt with trauma and grief creates energetic
Yeah.
blockages, which then create and manifest
And that-
themselves into physical symptoms that you
Right.
then go to a doctor to and they give you a pill for.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So I believe in Western medicine, 100%. I believe in it,
Sure.
but I do believe it's very limited, right? If you are experiencing something that has terrible symptoms, it is nearly impossible to focus on fixing the problem because the symptoms are so huge in your life. For example, depression. When you are experiencing depression, it can give you a sense of helplessness, and it's very difficult to get out from underneath that to start doing the work. So the medication comes in to raise you out of the symptoms, but the intention should be
To get
to
off of
raise
that.
you out of the symptoms so you can do the work to get off of the medication.
Right.
It should not be take this pill, oh, you feel better,
For the
now
rest
you're
of your life.
cured. That's not the thing.
Yeah.
And it also needs to be about prevention because, like I said, with myself, I've seen the difference in just taking care of yourself is all you have to do. And it's hard for everybody. It seems like it's such the most impossible thing when I tell somebody I need you to take care of yourself. They want to argue with me nonstop. I don't have time. Well, I'm sorry. I think you do. I could probably name 10 things you do all day long that you don't need to be doing, all those things. And for me, the way energy works in the body, the way it was explained to me on a quantum level was you have to think of energy as vibration. Everything is vibration. Everything. So the way it works is you are a vibrational being. You have a base vibrational signature that is unique to you. Only you have it, right? When you are experiencing your life, which the purpose of life is to feel, to experience your life, right? You have these feelings and experiences and you gain knowledge and understanding. Well, a feeling is not meant to be held on to. A feeling is meant to come into your energy, sort of ping pong around and give you all the feels and then leave your space and then welcome in the next energy. But what happens is we as humans, we don't like those feelings that are uncomfortable. Grief, sadness, guilt, betrayal, all those things, we don't like them. So it comes in, starts to ping pong around, and we grab it and go, I don't like you. And we squash it down and we push it down in our bodies and it gets stored in your atoms. That, you picture an atom with a nucleus and all of the electrons. That electron cloud is not empty. It's full of energy and it holds density, right? So the more you pack away, the heavier and heavier and heavier those atoms get, and they start to sink in the cell starts to sink, and that's when you get physical manifestation of the disease.
Wow.
So if you can pull that energy out before it gets to that point, then you don't have the manifestation of the disease. But the trick is allowing yourself to feel the feelings, acknowledging how you feel, not pushing it away, not judging yourself because you feel it, but just feel it. If you need to cry, cry. It'll be gone in 10 minutes. You'll feel better. But if you hang on to it, squash it and push it down, you're going to feel like that for the next 5 years while you fight against it. It's so much easier to just let it out.
Okay, so if you could give one piece of advice to somebody that feels like they have an energetic blockage, what would that advice be to help deal with it?
Don't focus on it. Do something else.
Okay.
And the reason is, if you remember how law of attraction works, it works to bring to you reflections of that which you focus upon. So if you feel like you are stuck on something and you continue to focus on being stuck on it, you will continue to get reflections of feeling stuck on it. The best example of this I can give you is when you get a new car and you're driving in your car and you may not have seen that car forever, and now driving you're like, there's one, what the hell? Well, there's one. It's
All of a sudden, that's
because
all you see, right?
That's all you see. That's because law of attraction says, "Oh my gosh, you really love this. Here's more, here's more, here's more." Similarly, if you're having a bad day and you're walking around going, "This day sucks, this day sucks," it's one thing on top of another, on top of another, and it just keeps coming because you are focused on the feeling of, "I'm having a bad day."
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get clarity when you're in the middle of something like that. If you feel like there's something going on in you and you can't put your finger on it, my best advice is to walk away from it, give it some breathing room, and try your best not to think about it. And then be open to clarity coming when you least expect it. During meditation, when you're talking to somebody, if you have an energy session, anything like that can give you clarity. But the more you try to puzzle it out and look at it like a problem, the more it is reflected to you as a problem. You have to make room for the solution in order for it to reach you.
So what you're
Yes.
telling me is when I'm driving and I get stuck behind somebody that's going really slow, and I get over, and then that lane goes even slower, and then I get back over because the other lane started going faster, and now that lane's going slow. I need to just like not think about that and try to focus on something else.
Put on a song. Put on a song and start singing. Find something else to be happy. You know,
Okay.
Esther Hicks says a lot, and it's very true. You have to find a way to be happy where you are first, because the way manifestation works is everything you already see is already manifested. So if you are paying attention to it, you're trying to manifest something already here.
Yeah.
Instead, you have to find a way to feel good where you are. That opens the field of possibility for you.
I'm so glad that you just said Esther Hicks, because you've mentioned Esther Hicks, you've already mentioned Bashar. So how do spiritual influences like Ram Dass, Esther Hicks, Bashar, Dr. Joe Dispenza, how do they influence your daily practice and teachings?
Oh, all the time. So for me, it's been a natural progression of teachers. When I first went through my awakening, I came across Ram Dass in a very bizarre way. That's a long story, but I came across him, and through him, in the way he teaches, I learned how to meditate. Looking back now, I recognize that I needed that kind of teacher to teach me how to meditate, because my mind was so busy, and having a hyper teacher was not going to work for me. So Ram Dass is extremely calm, and when he talks, he's very sympathetic and all this sort of stuff. So through him is where I started. He taught me how to calm my mind and sort of focus and that sort of stuff. And then one day I'm on YouTube just scrolling, and I came across this woman named Christina Lopes, and I went down the Christina Lopes rabbit hole, where I watched tons of her videos, just consume, consume, consume. But there came a point where I just felt like, I'm done with her. And I just moved on. And it doesn't mean that her teachings are wrong. It just means that everything I got from her is done. I can move on to the next teacher. Um, but I incorporate the practices from all of these teachers all day long in my work. Esther Hicks is one of the most profound ones for me. She really helped me understand law of attraction, which for a long time was a complete mind pretzel for me. I didn't understand. I'm like, what do you mean? How am I supposed to?
Make it make
How
sense.
am I?
Make it make sense.
Right. Right.
It is
'Cause my
challenging.
my
I was gonna say it's a lot of work to actually implement that, because you're having to deprogram yourself basically from like everything
yeah.
you ever
Well, we
the way
have a
you thought
habit.
before.
We have, as human beings, we have this nasty habit of focusing on everything around us instead of everything in front of us, and it tends to drag us down. And it's just a habit, because that's what society teaches us. Pay attention. You have to pay your bills. You have to do this. You have to do that. All that sort of thing. But Esther Hicks was probably one of the most profound influences, because she helped me understand law of attraction, which then once I understood it, holy cow, I use it all the time. And it's not that I get big giant manifestations, but little tiny ones happen all day long. Like the other day, I'm driving home from work and I'm thinking to myself, I could really go for some tacos for dinner. Tacos would be great. And then I had the thought, I don't feel like cooking. Nah, so I just dropped it, turned on the radio. I walk in my house, and I kid you not, my husband was making tacos when I walked in the door. And I thought, okay, I'm enjoying this, like little things like that happen all the time. Ram Dass really taught me that meditation doesn't have to be what everyone else tells you it is. It can be anything that works for you. Meditation is anything that gives you that clarity. And a lot of times, if you're doing something creative, it really, really spurs it. So, I used to think I had to sit in a dark room by myself and try to make my mind be quiet, which for someone like me is nearly impossible. But what he taught me is that I can paint and consider that a meditation. I can go for a walk and consider that a meditation. I don't have to be so hard on myself. Dolores Cannon is another big influence on me.
Same.
Yeah, and I learned a lot about how energy works through her work, through reading her materials. I've had myself 3 QHHT past life regression sessions that were enormously helpful. Um, Lots of insight through her, and the other one is Jane Roberts. She's
Oh
the
yeah.
OG channeler, right? Like, so she was back from the 60s, and she was channeling
That's speak.
a Seth, a being named Seth. Her book, The Unknown Universe, I think it's actually 2 volumes, was amazing. There was so much clarity in that. And I use everything I learned in those books when I'm looking at things around me. If I'm looking at something with a lot of contrast, I hear Esther in my head talking about how without contrast, you can't know what you want. You have to know what you don't want to know what you want. You know, all these little things are constantly playing in the back of my head. So I couldn't say that it's any one teaching. It's just the incorporation of all the teachings that has really
Yes.
helped me the most.
I have a question. How did you fall into the Schumann and make the connection of how it affects us and it's part of the whole thing that's happening right now?
Yeah. So it's a really fun story. I have always my whole life been interested in space. I definitely feel like my spirit is a traveler, is a space traveler. And I came across at some point a show on Gaia TV where they were talking about the energy coming from the sun. And I can remember watching it and thinking to myself, so, like going through the logic in my head. So, if the sun is emitting energy, and energy, according to quantum mechanics, energy slowed down becomes information. If we're all vibrational beings and the sun is sending energy in our direction, it stands to reason that that sun energy would affect us in some way, right? So, I found out how to track the Schumann resonance, and for an entire year, I kept track every day how I felt versus how it looked. And I started noticing correlating patterns. So I charted all this over a year. And then one day I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't be the only person. I cannot possibly be the only person experiencing this. And so I just made a video. I'm like, this is what I feel. Let's see what you guys have to say. And I put it out there, and the response was quite literally overwhelming of how many people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you explained this. That explains so much to me. But it's true, and energy comes from everywhere. It's not just the sun. You know, people are always sending me notes. Well, there was a storm in Russia, so the graph could be that. I'm like, yes, I know. It's still energy. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it can comes from the sun or a storm or anywhere. The original source is source. And it doesn't make sense to me to say source is limited and that it only sends us energy through the sun. That doesn't make any sense to me. So it doesn't matter if it's a volcano, an eruption, or an earthquake or a storm. It's all energy, and it's all affecting us. And this ionosphere, that Schumann resonance is measuring the reverberation of electromagnetic energy kind of around the sphere of the Earth in the ionosphere. It's like an echo. So if it's trapped in there, it would be affecting us. I don't care if it comes from the Earth or from the sun. It doesn't matter. It's still affecting us. So that's kind of how I got into it. And it's just sort of taken off from there. People reaching out, asking me questions. I'll go in meditation and ask, and sometimes I get an answer and sometimes I don't. But every morning, all the information I'm offering, I'm directly channeling when I'm talking on the screen. When I shut off that video, I have no idea what I just said. 90% of the time, I'm sitting there going, I hope that made sense. And then I'm sitting down and I'm like editing and going through and going, okay, we're good. There's been plenty of times I get off and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I said that. Oh, I didn't know I said
Right,
that. Oh, that's so fun. You know,
We literally
but it's
just
been,
did the same thing last night.
Yeah, kind of.
yeah, it happens. And it's such a strange feeling to try to explain to someone who's never experienced it. But once I disconnect, I'm done. But all of my information comes from my channeling, from within a meditation or during a channeling. And I stopped trying to censor it, and it took off on its own.
Very cool. Now you were talking
Let it
about
flow.
doing this on a video and editing. So for our audience, can you please do us a favor and tell them where they can find you, what your website is, where you are on social media, and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So every morning, without fail, even on the holidays, I do a Schumann resonance report. I usually post around 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, and I post on YouTube, TikTok, Clapper, and Instagram. And I have the same handle on all of them. It's just Consciously Erin on all of them. I do want to be very careful to say there are a lot of fake accounts with my name and my material on them.
Hmm.
my accounts do not have any numbers, spaces, weird characters, weird spellings, nothing. So just be mindful. And I will
Thank you
never,
for letting us-
Links in the video description box below.
yeah. And I also will never reach out to you and say, I felt your energy from across the universe and feel like you need a message. So that's not me either.
Okay. Good to know that.
Oh, goodness.
Ask your famous question.
Oh, all right. So, what is your greatest hope for the future of humanity?
That's a big question. My greatest hope for the future of humanity is that we learn to see each other exactly where we are instead of projecting on everybody where we want to be and looking at everyone as a reason why we're not there. Instead, I'd so much rather for us to all recognize that the universe is not limited, it's abundant. There's enough for everybody. There's plenty to go around. Nobody has to compete. This is not a competition. I want you to win too. And if we could just see each other as exactly who we are for the beautifully broken, wonderfully put back together creatures that are constantly expanding, I think it would bring a lot of peace to the world. Because if you can see someone in their pain, you can see them in their joy. And if you can feel empathy for them and their pain, you can help them overcome that. And I think if we could do that more often, it would have really long lasting effects for everyone.
It sounds
We have
very
to see,
healing
yeah,
effect.
we need to see each other as people
I
is the thing.
love that answer.
Absolutely.
That was a beautifully worded,
Yes.
well thought out answer. I really resonate with that.
Good, I'm glad.
What kind of upcoming projects do you have going on? You mentioned you're writing a book earlier.
I am writing a book. I'm actually co-authoring a science fiction fantasy book with a very good friend of mine. He's on TikTok also. His name is Dirty Rooster on TikTok. His name is Dominic. I'd say I'm about 3/4 of the way through. It's the science. It's a science. It's got all the elements. It's got fights and no romance in this one, but it's got fights and elevation and growth and all kinds of stuff. Like you said earlier, every Monday at 1 p.m. On TikTok, I do Professor Brown Breaks It Down. It is a live class that is open to anyone. The replay is also always up on my YouTube channel. Today we talked about Dark Night of the Soul, what it is, where the term
I
comes
caught the
from.
end of that
what it
actually.
Yeah, so I
saw
try
you
to cover as
live.
many subjects as possible. And then on Monday nights, if you are a paying subscriber on YouTube or TikTok, I do a guided shadow work group class. Every week, I will post the exercises. You have a week to do them. And then Monday, we have an interactive class that is limited to just the people in the class, so it's not an overwhelming number of people. I create a lesson. I give the lesson. I talk about what I wrote for the exercises, and then we invite people on the screen to share their experiences, and we all kind of support each other working through it.
Wow, that sounds really
Beautiful.
awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the
that's-
work that you're
that
doing.
sounds
I
fun.
mean, it sounds like you're really contributing towards this like ascension process that we're all on.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
I am.
being that beacon of light. Seriously.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. It is my highest passion. I assume you guys are all familiar with Bashar. I follow his formula to the letter. I do my highest passion to the greatest of my ability to the best for as long as I can, and it's led me where I wanted to be. So I'm just waiting on 2026, the end of 2026.
What's that? Tell us.
So the end of 2026, beginning of 2027, Bashar has said we have the potential for a major contact event that will change things in our history. So I am very much looking forward to it because it's got to be better,
We've been hearing that 2027 timeline a lot, and we actually usually ask our guests about that, like what their predictions or thoughts are around it. And while we're talking about this, can you just tell us real quick, like, what's your opinion of like disclosure and the possible, I say possible, but really I totally believe existence of aliens and NHI? Like, what's your assessment of that?
All right. So logically, right, scientifically speaking, to say there's no chance of life in the entire universe is like taking a teaspoon of water out of the ocean and saying there's no fish in it.
Right.
We have no idea. The universe is enormous and expansive, and it is very egocentric of us to think that we just happen to live in the exact right place where there's only life right here. I'm sorry, that's not possible. It's the odds
We
are
were we were
astronomically.
sort of programmed that way, I think, too, as well. So
We definitely were, and I mean that's a whole nother subject. That's to me, that's a form of control, right? They make you afraid to go to hell, so you have to act in a certain way to appease
Yeah.
them, right? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. So that's a whole nother story. But I do believe
And then the
I my
propaganda against, the extraterrestrials, like in the government, I guess you could say, and the news. You know what I
right.
mean? Like it was always laughed at
Yes,
forever.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Stigmatized.
Yeah.
Stigmatized, absolutely. Well, that's
Yes.
been going on forever. I mean, you have to think
Mhm.
about it. The guy who said that the universe didn't revolve around the earth was burned at the stake,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Right.
Galileo burned at, he was, all kinds of stuff
Right.
happened just for people trying to speak up about this. My feeling is that our governments, the collectively in the world, know that there's something going on. How much they know, I don't know. I myself have had enough personal experiences that I have zero doubt. I
Right.
Ooh,
see
I want
ships
to
all the
hear
time.
something if you want to share.
I see ships all the time. I see them all
Oh.
the time. I saw one yesterday, as a matter of fact, and there's no way it was an airplane. I mean, it's just unbelievable what I see. What happened? I was sitting outside, took the dog out. It was like 11:30 at night, and he wouldn't shut up. So I took him outside. I'm sitting on my porch, and I just happened to look up and take a
Yep.
picture of the sky because I thought it's so pretty. Didn't think about it for weeks. Didn't think about it, and then I got a notice that the storage was full on my phone. Right, so excuse me. Sorry.
Nope, you're okay.
My house isn't dusty, no.
Yeah. Same with us. Like I'm like trying to get
um,
hair off me. Sorry.
ah, so I started going through my pictures to delete the ones to make space. And I came across this one of the sky and I thought, well, that's weird. What'd I take that for? So I like zoom in and I'm start looking around and there is a diamond shaped thing right up in the corner of the picture. And I noticed I took several pictures, like moments, like minutes apart, and it never moved. So it wasn't a satellite. It wasn't,
Wow.
I don't know how to describe it. And I haven't seen it since then. And I would never have noticed it if I hadn't had to get rid of my photos and I started going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that actually happened.
I freaking love it. All right, so this is the original picture, as you can see, just a picture of the
Oh.
sky. No big deal, right?
Okay.
But then when I zoomed in, that's what I see.
Wow.
Oh.
It's
Oh
like a
yeah.
triangle. It has
Yeah.
depth and width to it for sure.
Yep.
Wow.
And in the picture, it's literally like right up here in this little corner. It's like this little tiny speck that I just was messing around with.
So
Yeah,
that
and so weird.
isn't it? Isn't it? One night.
Look at the shape of that. It looks like it has like
Yeah.
plasma, like
Yeah.
residual,
Wow.
like a plasma field or something around it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's cool.
something.
Wow.
And then
Are you trying
I
to
have
connect, or do you just happen to see him? I keep interrupting
I
you.
just
I'm sorry.
so I keep I'm not necessarily trying to connect. I'm always open to connection. I have a dog that always wants to go outside at bizarre times of night. So when he wants to go outside, I go because it's always been when I'm walking him that I will see something,
Ooh.
you know?
Oh,
Ooh, there is a connection with that. I just got the
Yeah.
chill.
Yeah. So
I keep
I
getting the
always
chill.
try to
I
look.
always feel a lot today with this
And
conversation.
then
I should have
yeah,
been.
I definitely believe that my oversoul, whatever you want to call it, my higher self, has a lot of incarnations that travel through space. I think that's what feeds my obsession with space. And I had a dream one time that was one of those incredibly hyper realistic dreams that I've had. The woman who did my QHHT session said, when you have dreams that are so hyper realistic, it's not a dream, it's a connection to another life experience of some kind. And in this dream, I was in this very plain room. It looked like a boardroom almost. There was charts up on the wall, and there was a man standing across from me. He looked like a human being, very normal, but he was somehow different. Like his proportions were off, or something was off. You know how when you look at something, you're like, something's weird here.
Yeah.
And he was talking to me and he was walking me over to this chart on the wall and he was explaining, this is a star chart, I'm going to show you where you're going. And he was pointing at the chart and he was like mapping things out for me. And when I woke up, I sat up in the bed and couldn't breathe for a second, covered in sweat. I had the image of that constellation in my head, and before I could get to my phone to look it up, it evaporated out of my head.
Oh,
Oh wow.
But it was so clear, so clear. So between my own experiences, what I've seen, listening to Bashar, and when I listen to Bashar, I can feel it in me that he's telling the truth. I have
Yeah.
zero doubt, zero. And as far as
I love
disclosure
that you said
goes,
that. Thank you.
yeah, I think as far as disclosure goes, that they're running out of time and that they're going to have to
Yeah.
do something.
Tick tock,
I think
tick
so
tock.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, for
I
what
mean,
we've gathered from different guests, it sounds like it's going to be more of an inside job. Like, it won't necessarily be the government. It's going to be more through the people, and then just the awareness will grow, I guess. But it seems like, yeah, there is going to be an event, and it's coming soon, I
right.
guess.
Yeah, we
But yeah,
continue the
that's
same message
interesting.
from a lot of our guests, especially channelers that are
Yeah.
our guests.
Yeah.
Tom and AJ, we just spoke with again recently last
Speaking
week.
from source.
Uh huh. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean they say the same thing. You know that it's coming.
Yep.
it's coming.
And your story,
It's
I didn't mean
coming.
to cut you off, I'm sorry, but your story reminded me of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, because when they were abducted, they said that when they were on the ship, they were shown a map of a star system. And when they came
Ooh,
back, like when they were on Earth,
I just got the chills again.
the star system hadn't been discovered yet. We hadn't discovered that particular star system until years later, and they were like, wait a minute, is this the place Betty and Barney Hill were talking about? And then it was like, whoa, so how'd they know that way back then if we hadn't even figured it out yet?
And then wasn't
Yeah,
it Zeta Reticuli?
Zeta Reticuli, yes.
Uh huh.
yeah,
And then Bob Lazar
yeah,
kind of confirmed the same thing.
yes,
I have a
absolutely.
weird, strange feeling that's probably the one that you saw.
It could have been. It could have been. I don't remember now, but I just remember him very specifically pointing to a very specific point and saying, "This is where you're going. I'm going to show you how you get there." And I remember thinking, "Pay attention. Like, don't be
Yeah.
distracted. Like, you need to know this. This
Yeah.
kind of thing."
Oh,
And people who want to say, like people like David Grush who come forward and they're just like, okay, I'm sorry. You're telling me that the person that our government trusts with the highest military
Yes.
secrets and the most trained observers in the entire world, you're going to tell me that you know better? I'm sorry. I don't believe you. you
I'm
know?
so glad you brought up David
You know?
Grush.
Yeah. And his boss too. His boss, I can't remember his
J-Strat.
name.
Carl, no.
Yes.
J-Strat,
Carl
yeah,
Nell. So
Carl
I'm
Nell.
thinking,
Yeah.
yeah, and if they come out and say something's going on, I believe those people because they have nothing to gain. Nothing. Absolutely nothing to gain
Right.
from this. Everything to lose and nothing to gain. To me, that's truth.
Yep.
Right.
Same thing with Admiral Tim Gallaudet.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yep. Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we're very, very passionate about this subject, if you can't tell, and that's why we do a weekly UAP
Yeah,
UFO news show
for the UAP
on the
Society.
UAP
check it out.
Society, because we just feel like this conversation is way too important to continue to just keep getting swept under the rug. Like, we don't want it swept under the rug and stigmatized anymore. We want this conversation to be front and foremost and taken seriously, because this is the biggest secret of humanity. Not just like one person, one region, one religion. No, all of us. Like,
Right. The worst kept the worst kept secret in history. Right.
Yes, yes. That people have been murdered for to keep the secret.
yeah, it's
and
wild.
that is
It's really crazy.
that is one of the biggest shames ever. That I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, well, I think that's why these
Yeah.
kinds of the conversations that we're having now are important, because, like I said, we're just keeping it in the forefront of people's minds.
Right.
We're not allowing it to just be laughed at and swept under the rug anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. And I will tell you, as someone who's still loves science, I don't know. Do you guys watch Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh, we love
Yes.
Skinwalker Ranch. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the reason I like Skinwalker Ranch is because Dr. Taylor is the head scientist on this. They're not playing around. They're doing reproducible scientific testing that has evidence coming up, and it's crazy the stuff they're finding, and it blows my mind that it is not all over the news. Like every time I watch that show, I'm like, how are people not talking about
What
this?
do you think of the
Right.
latest
You know?
episode? Are you caught up on the new season?
I am caught up. I saw the one. Well, I didn't see the one today, so I won't see that one till tomorrow. But I saw the one last week with the lasers, and there was that like cutout in the laser. So my immediate thought question.
Blocked, and then all of a sudden it's
Yes.
now continued up there. But yeah, that was one.
Yeah. So these were my immediate questions. This is where I went. I said, what I was thinking. What is the difference in the quality of the beam of light and the two colors? What is the actual particle difference, and why would one reflect differently than the other? Then the rounded off edges of the lasers. I'm thinking, what would make it reflect in that way? Is that something that's highly reflective, like aluminum, or is that something that's dull, that wouldn't reflect a scatter pattern, right? And then with the cutout, I'm thinking, okay, so on one side it's rounded and one side it's not. That tells me it's not a uniform shape. Otherwise, it would have been the same all the way across. To me, that's a shape with a square type end and a curved front, like an aerodynamic type shape,
So what do you
is
think
what that.
the anomaly above the triangle is?
I think they have a portal there.
Ah,
I
Yeah.
think
somebody
there's
said
some sort of
that.
black hole portal, something.
Right.
There's too many
That's what we
things, and
speculate too.
Dr. Taylor has been very clear about it looks like a black hole, it acts like a black hole. Einstein proposed Einstein-Rosenberg bridges. These are possibilities. We need to explore this, discuss this, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think there's something there.
Hmm.
I really do.
I do too. And I think it is connected to other places like Mount Wilson Ranch, for one.
Oh, sure.
Tunnels,
Right,
hashtag
yeah.
tunnels.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We know nothing about our oceans. Let's just think about that. We know less
Right.
about the oceans than we do about space. So,
Right.
I mean, who knows what's down there? It could be right in front of us, quite literally.
We've talked about that too, to where it's really wild that 70% of this planet is ocean, and we've only explored like less than a handful of it. There's 80% that we haven't even seen with our own eyes or mapped or anything. So it's like,
Ooh, I just had a
That's right.
crazy thought because I made the connection in my brain about us also being like 70% water or something like that. But and that we are also, I mean, I think we're starting to explore, but we are also like our subconscious and all that starting to get explored, which is like, underwater. I don't know, like
oh, I see the analogy
I
you're
know.
creating.
Yeah.
Do you see it?
I like it. I like it. I see it. It's a good parallel. It's a very good
Yeah.
parallel.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Dr. Emoto? And
I have not.
oh,
Ooh.
Oh, you've had to have. He's the water man with the crystals and the emotions in the water.
So what he does is he'll take some water, right, and he'll impose, like, let's say, good vibrations on that water.
Oh, and then he freezes
Word.
it, right?
Yes.
Yes, I didn't know his name. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I didn't know his name. I have used those images though in some of my classes to show the difference that it makes. I actually
Yeah.
used that when I was teaching at the medical school in one of the classes I was giving.
Okay.
I was talking to the students about how I really hope that one day they are an expert on some disease. I hope they know everything there is to know about a disease. But one thing I will always promise them is no matter how much you know about that disease, you will never be an expert on your patient. Your patient is the expert on your patient. And if you talk to them kindly and involve them in their treatment plan and ask them active questions, you will save a lot of time, effort, and money. And I showed them those slides to say, this is what it feels like inside your patient's body when you're being a jerk. This is what it feels like inside your patient's body when you're showing empathy. Imagine how that feels when all the water in your body is acting like that,
I
Yeah.
love that you're creating a new generation of conscious
Yes.
thinking doctors and nurses.
Yeah, that's
Thank you
awesome.
for doing that.
I was definitely trying. Something I will say. So I don't work at the university anymore. I left there to do this. But the last 2 years I was there, the last two incoming classes of students were very, very different. I think COVID had a big effect on these students. Before I left, I was getting a lot of questions like, when is it appropriate for me to suggest acupuncture? When is it appropriate for me to suggest meditation? When is it appropriate for me to do this?
Wow. Yeah. It's because people started questioning things, I think. Maybe.
Yes, I keep wanting to call them kids. They're not kids, but this group, these students, these kids are really open to this. And there's actually something called healing touch therapy, which is accredited by the American Medical Association, so doctors can bill for it. And all it is basically Reiki. It was just redesigned by a nurse and put forward as offering therapeutic benefit, and now it's offered. It's used a lot in hospice, but it's getting more and more popular as people become more and more familiar with it. But it's basically just Reiki. So it is starting to spread out. It's getting there. It's just taking its sweet time.
I'm glad that the East and Western medicines are finally starting to like merge a little bit, because they were on opposite sides of the field
Tiny
for
bit.
a long time.
Yes, just a tiny bit. Just
But
a tiny bit.
Progress is progress, right? Progress is progress.
Yes. And the last thing I want to tell you guys, just for anyone who's interested, if anyone is interested in learning more about how energy affects your body medically, there's a book called The Quantum Doctor.
Oh, thank you so much.
This is his name is Dr. Amit Goswami. He's a quantum physicist, and he wrote this book and it breaks down vibrationally how stuff works in your body and how quantum mechanics applies to that. And like the idea of energy slowed down becomes information. That's why meditation is important, because your energy is going crazy all day long. If you can slow it down enough to receive the energy instead of it sort of bouncing off, that's information that you can embody. And he talks a lot about this in here. I will say there's a lot in here that was over my head, even with all the letters behind my name. Just skip it. You don't need it. But there's a lot of really good information in here. He gets very mathy in some of it, but you can skip the math. Just get the basic concept.
Okay.
Thank you for that
Awesome.
presentation. I love that when people do show and tell and give us things to think about. I'm a teacher, so I love when people give homework.
Oh,
I
good.
think it
Yeah.
was you I saw earlier, but it was the second time I saw the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Worthy book, was that you?
Yes, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
And that was the second time I had saw that book. So I ended up, after seeing you talk about it, and after I saw something else about it, I actually put it on my Amazon list. It's like
Yeah.
a month. I just have it there, so I don't forget.
It's a very good read.
gonna get
It's a
it.
very good
Probably.
read. I haven't.
Mhm.
I'm only about a quarter of the way through it so far, but it's been very helpful, even just in that small amount.
Awesome.
This has been
Awesome.
such an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Like, I'm sitting here like, wow, I feel like I could talk to you for like 10 more days.
Right.
Well, you know where to find me, right? Here's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us. It was really a pleasure having you on.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to have 3 new friends to talk to, especially 3 new friends that also like UFOs, because I always feel like such a weirdo.
Oh, you got a UFO home in us. That's
Yeah,
for
you,
sure.
you got to check out our show after this.
Yeah, you should.
You ate pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will. Yeah,
And
send
if
me a
you,
link.
I don't know
will
if you're on
definitely-
Discord, but we also have the HellO AlliE Discord. If you're interested, I know you're busy
Okay,
with lots of
that's
stuff.
very cool.
Yeah.
Hello, Al. Yeah, send me all the links. Send me the links, because that's the easiest way for me. I got 10,000 things in my head. I'll say yes and then forget 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Do you have any last minute words of advice for our audience before we sign off?
Yeah, just relax. Relax.
Yeah.
It's just life. Nobody's gonna get out alive.
It's gonna
Everybody's
be
gonna
okay,
die.
right?
We're all
It's gonna be all right.
each other home, like Ron.
We are
Yeah.
all just walking each other home. It's not a race. Slow down. Enjoy your life. The purpose. People get twisted up in the idea that they have to figure out what their purpose is. But your purpose is simply to rediscover who you are. That's all it is. It's not here to fix anybody else. You're not here to save the world. You're here to save yourself. And the hope is that in discovering that magic inside of you, that it translates to other people.
Yeah, and Bashar would say that you want to follow your joy, you want to stay,
Yes.
and that you want, so I think that is super important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Just relax, man. Take a breath. It's all right.
Great
You guys
words
are
of advice,
awesome.
yes.
I love you. Erin, thank you so much.
Love you.
Thank you so much. Leslie, thank you so much. And to our
Awesome.
audience that's still sticking around, please do us a favor and smash that like button, click subscribe, ring our little notification bell, drop a lovely comment down below, and share this video with your family and friends to help us spread the good word. Much love,
Love.
peace, and namaste.